Good evening. Welcome to the regular Planning Commission meeting in Grand Blanc County, March 7th, 2024. We don't have everyone here that we expected, but I think we're going to get started and try to stay on time. So if you please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Attendance this evening. Let's see. That better? Yeah, there we go. In attendance this evening, Planning Commission members, we have Ms. Coulter, Mr. Andre, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Gellings, Mr. Yancho, Mr. Bush. From our Planning and Zoning Department, Mr. Jeremy Smith. From our Planning Consultant, we have Andy Amott, I think is the last name, and Ms. Jill Boehm. All right, I think most of you know or have figured out that if you would like to speak regarding anything, pretty much, if you want to talk to us about, you need to fill out a card if you would like to address the Planning Commission. We've got a number of them here, and feel free to fill them out if you haven't yet. You can still turn those in even when you go to speak. Let's see. Our agenda this evening, we're going to have a couple of opportunities here. We're going to have, if you're here for the rezoning case, you'll have an opportunity to speak during that. If you would like to make a public comment and address the Planning Commission on anything other than that, now would be the time to do that. I don't know if there's anyone that would like to do that, or if all the cards that we've gotten might be for the rezoning. Okay.
Thank you.
So what we'll do is I need to formally open public comments session. So if anyone would like to address the Planning Commission on anything other than the rezoning case, now's the time to do that. Yes, sir. Come up to the,
Can we get your name and address?
Josh, June, 5152 Wishing Drive. Okay. First, I'd like to ask you guys if you've been to our local Walmart lately. You see anything in the back left corner? There, that's a little odd. They have a section back there that's dedicated to chickens. I know. Feed, all kinds of stuff back there. Did you know the average eggs you probably bought are about 2 months old? And did you know that hens can lay eggs without a rooster? I've been asked that before, so no, you do not need a rooster. We as a, I can't speak, sorry. We as a society have been so disconnected and desensitized from where and how our food is being produced. Mass industrialization and commercialization of animals have led to so many outbreaks of salmonella, along with different strains of the avian flu that wiped out more than 36 million chickens and turkeys just a few years ago. We have come a long way since my father's time growing up on a small farm in Columbiaville. Working the field and milking the cows was the way of life. Food, you knew where it came from. Neighbors, helping neighbors, the small town and community. These days, mass production is everything. How many chickens can you cram into the smallest space? It comes down to money. This is why I'm proposing an amendment to the ordinance for having chickens in Grand Blanc Township be reviewed so people can have backyard chickens. To give people the option and choice to not support these commercialized farms. Having access to healthy food is a choice and a right. I am not proposing everyone get chickens, and the vast majority of people won't. I am asking for the option to be there for the few that just want some points, or that want them. Now, for just a few points of reference, for the following cities that do allow chickens, Auburn Hills allows 6 or less with a permit. City of Berkeley allows 3 hens with a permit. There are 5 permits only in that city. Only 2 are taken right now. Ferndale allows 6 hens or less with permit. City of Davison allows 4 hens or less with a permit. Village of Holly allows 3 hens or allows 3 hens. Madison Heights allows 6 hens or less with permit. And Burton, 6 hens or less. And Farmington Hills too. I didn't see what their regulations were on that, but they were on the list. Currently in the works is the city of Detroit. They are wanting ducks and beehives too. I'm not asking for that.
I want to interrupt you for a second.
Yes.
Public comment's supposed to be limited to 3 minutes, and so I think we need you to wrap.
I'm almost done. Almost done. So if these cities are doing it, there's no excuse we can't either. I do have copies of my proposal and guidelines. I sent some to Jeremy too. He has it. If anyone wants it. I have only a few copies, but I do have a few. So let me finish.
Jeremy's the right person to send it to, 'cause
Okay. And then just let me finish with this. Can your cat or dog provide you with breakfast? So, thanks.
anyone else like to address the planning commission on anything other than the rezoning request? If not, we'll close the public comment portion, move on to the next item on our agenda is approve of our minutes from February 1st, 2024. Mr. Secretary?
Yes, I've reviewed the minutes as we have in front of us, and I believe they are substantially correct, and I would make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes
Support.
by Mr. Yancho, support by Mr. Bush. Any further discussion? If not, a vote is in order. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. All right, next item is approval of the balance of our agenda. Any changes? No, sir. Anyone?
Make a motion to approve tonight's agenda as presented.
Motion by Mr. Anderson to approve.
Second.
Motion as presented, support by Mr. Johnson. Any other discussion? All right, a vote is in order. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 7-0. Correspondence. I believe we have a couple pieces, actually several pieces. One, we have, I don't know what you call this, a flyer from Michigan Economic Development Association, kind of listing some of their upcoming events. Anyone's interested in those? We've got the Forest Service, Department of Agriculture Tree Owners Manual. This is,
So what that is we'll be discussing the next upcoming months, amending the tree ordinance. A few of us went to that fall conference, and there's some trees in our landscaping ordinance that need to be removed and/or added to comply with the state's requirements.
we also were distributed shortly before the meeting, a letter to the Grand Blanc Township Planning Commission regarding the rezoning request. We'll kind of read a portion of that here shortly once we get into that particular item. Old business, I don't believe we have any old business, so that does bring us to new business. Zoning case 677, Paragon Development. This will be a public hearing. You have your opportunity to speak at that time. Just want to remind you, please keep it at 3 minutes. We're going to have a timer going, just so everybody gets a chance to speak. One person doesn't monopolize. This is regarding the request to rezone from R1 to neighborhood commercial. So, we have an applicant that would like to kind of give us an overview of what you're requesting and any changes. since last time. There may have been some folks present this evening that weren't here.
Yes, my name is George Reisig, 9400 South Saginaw Street, Grand Blanc, Michigan. And I represent the applicant. With me tonight are Mr. Jerry Odwin, who's the third person in the row there, and Mr. Jerry Mansour. Mr. Odwin is colloquially the property owner. His company owns it. And Mr. Mansour is a local real estate specialist who deals in both residential and commercial properties and has been in the development business for about 35 years. This is our request to rezone the two parcels, 008 and 009, which are located on Baldwin Road, from R1 single-family residential to NC neighborhood commercial with conditions. This is a conditional rezoning under the statute and under your ordinance. All rezoning in Michigan, all zoning period, can only take place if there's a statute that allows townships, cities, and villages to rezone. Michigan has such a statute. In the absence of a statute, no municipality can zone. So if there was no zoning or no statute, there'd be no zoning ordinance in Grand Blanc Township, and I could put cement plant up anywhere I wanted to. But Michigan statutes say this. They say townships can zone. That is, they may. They don't have to. And they say if a township chooses to zone, then it must zone, not it may zone, it must zone according to a plan. That plan is what you refer to as the master plan. So the statute enables you to zone and says if you choose to do that, you must have a master plan in order to zone pursuant to. The master plan includes a lot of information about infrastructure, about population, about demographics, about land, about soils, about water, and then it concludes, after going through all of those criteria, and it comes up with what's called a future land use map. And the future land use map is the township's wish list. This is the plan that they say the township must zone to, not may zone to, must zone to. If you do not zone pursuant to the plan, then you're violating the state statute and you're violating your ordinance. And so that's why you have a master plan. So it's both a sword and a shield for the township. And that's good, because what a township does is every 5 or 10 years, there's been some changes in the township. You know, we have less population, we have more population, we have different types of population, we have different calls for housing, the population is aged, the population is younger. What do we have to do to make our township work? And that's what your master plan tells you. And that's why your ordinance, when it says if somebody wants to make a change to the zoning map, they have to address 13 criteria. And there's an extra criterion if you're doing conditional zoning, which we're doing tonight. You got to state the conditions, make the offer yourself. And this is a conditional rezoning. We were here before without the conditions. Same zoning request, but without conditions. We've added those to this. There was no vote on it last time. We voluntarily withdrew it and thought we'd add some conditions to, I guess I would say, soften the rezoning request. But the very first criterion in your ordinance is the master plan. It says that if you're making a rezoning request, it must be consistent with the master plan, unless the master plan is aged out so much and conditions have changed so much that ignoring the master plan makes sense. Your master plan is basically brand new. And your master plan calls for this area to be neighborhood commercial. So per se, we meet the requirements of the ordinance, and that our request is consistent with the master plan. That's number one. And not only are we consistent with the master plan, we thereby become consistent with the statute, which requires us to zone to your master plan and you to zone pursuant to the master plan. So we meet that first criterion. And I think we meet all the criteria that are set forth in your ordinance. I'm going to go through those briefly. The second one is the rezoning request compatible with the site's physical, geological, hydrological, and other environmental features? And I go through it. This presentation you've had a couple months now. The new one just simply adds the conditions that we're asking to impose on us. There's a pond, there's wetlands of about 1.4 acres on the 15-acre parcel, 3-acre pond. It's rectangular in shape. There are two parcels side by side. We have a drawing of it on here. It accommodates any of the principal permitted uses in the NC district. And it would also, it would accommodate some of the special uses. Not all of them, but some of the special uses. Now, your NC district, you have modified your ordinance, or amended your ordinance, to allow NC to sort of downzone. That is, there's a classification or a hierarchy of zoning from least dense uses to most dense uses. Most dense uses being like the industrial uses, and the least dense uses being the single-family residential. In your, I think, professional office, office service, and neighborhood commercial, you have now employed in your ordinance and incorporated into your ordinance what's known as cumulative zoning, that you can do anything in that particular district and certain uses that are under that district, that is lower density uses. And so that's why we're actually going with NC. We're looking for a lower use because we think that's going to go best on the property. And that's why, if you look at our conditions, we've excluded from consideration, as part of our conditions, some of the uses that are considered perfectly acceptable in NC, but not what we want for this property. So we want to restrict this property by imposing those conditions on it. The next criterion, the third one, is evidence that we cannot receive a reasonable return under the current zoning. And the reason you have that in your ordinance is not because you care about the return that a developer is making or a property owner is making. That's because that's what courts care about. And so whoever drafted this ordinance says, we get that. Because when you go to court, all this master plan stuff goes over the court's head. And the court says, can you do anything on the property now under its current zoning? That is it zoned for non-use? And under the current zoning, this is zoned for non-use. We submitted a spreadsheet with calculations on it. First of all, we submitted a drawing showing what a plan under current R1 could be. Now, the problem with this property, because of its shape and orientation, location of the pond, we have to get a road to the back to develop in the back. The road is unloaded for almost its entire length. Then when it gets to the back, the only place you load it is on 2 cul-de-sacs. So under the current zoning, we can get a certain, I believe it was like 11 units in there. You look at the spreadsheet that we submitted, we showed the take-up costs, the development costs, and the development costs are off the charts relative to what you can sell on the property, and it's because of the unloaded road. That's just simply a fact that has to do with the nature of this particular parcel of property. So we lose, I think I calculated $240-some thousand if we're successful. So there is no way this property can be used under its current zoning, and make any money off it. Even if a person's going to put a single house on the back, the cost of the driveway to the back would be prohibitive. The next criteria is compatibility of all the potential uses with the surrounding uses in zoning. Well, this is zoned for single-family residential now, but everything along that area is master planned for neighborhood commercial. To turn down the zoning for this neighborhood commercial, you'll have to turn down every zoning in that same area that you have master planned for commercial. Remember when your master plan came out, it wasn't just a planner sitting in an office saying, let me brainstorm this. You had visioning sessions. You had input from the population here. You talked with your planners. You went through all the physical features of properties around here. You looked at what was happening up the street on Baldwin Road, what was happening over in the tech village on the south of it, what had happened over towards Baldwin Road on the old tree farm over there. And you said, this is supposed to be neighborhood commercial here. You didn't, it wasn't free either. You paid, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars for it, and you came up with the best plan you could. And you said, this is going to be neighborhood commercial. So once you turn down one neighborhood commercial, the property next door cannot be approved for neighborhood commercial, and the one next to that can't be approved for neighborhood commercial. So you're frustrating your master plan, frustrating your ordinance, and frustrating the statute that says you must zone to the master plan. Are there sufficient capacity of township utilities to serve this? Yes, there are. Your master plan map 9 shows both water and sewer serve these parcels and all the parcels along there in sufficient capacities to allow zoning to NC. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done it. The master plan map 9 is something that you referred to when making this neighborhood commercial in this area on your master plan. Is the street system sufficient? We did a traffic study on there, a rezoning and traffic study. It was attached, the initial traffic study. Your experts had some, your engineers had some comments on it. They sent it back to Weiss and Vanderbrink. They addressed the comments, and we have a valid rezoning traffic study. It's not a full-blown traffic study. That comes at site plan in some occasions, not all the time, but most site plans will require a full site plan study. And things might have to change then. But for rezoning, we satisfy that criteria. Is there a demand for the type of uses permitted in this area? Yes, there are. We don't have a lot of,
We ask that the audience remain silent. You don't want to be interrupted when you're speaking. So.
thank you, Mr. Owen. There is demand. If there's not demand, nobody's going to buy it. Okay? It'll sit, you can rezone all properties NC you want. If nobody wants it, they look like fields. Okay, so the demand is there. We have our, we don't have a lot of NC property open that's zoned here in the township. And so that's another reason that you master plan this NC, to provide a sufficient supply of NC property in the township. Once again, it goes back to the master plan. That's one thing you studied. When you called this out to be neighborhood commercial, you said, we need neighborhood commercial. There's insufficient neighborhood commercial in this area. You didn't throw a neighborhood commercial there because you thought, well, we have some, but wouldn't it be great to have more? You needed neighborhood commercial, and your master plan says that you need neighborhood commercial, and you chose this area for it. Mr. Hoffman, at our very first meeting here, said something. He's not here tonight, but he was scratching his head and he's saying, aren't they doing exactly what we asked them to do? When we passed our master plan, didn't we tell everybody we want this to be neighborhood commercial, and aren't they doing what we're telling them we want this to be? I thought it was a very simple, straightforward, on-point question. And that's what we're doing. We're doing exactly what you asked us to. Next, are the boundaries reasonable in relationship to the surroundings? And construction on the site will be able to meet dimensional regulations? Absolutely. There's more than enough land here to build. We will be able to meet all setbacks. We will not be seeking any variances when it comes to site plan. We have sufficient land upon which to build a use under neighborhood commercial, excluding the uses that we are asking you to exclude tonight in our conditions. We submitted a conceptual plan as attached as Exhibit B to our presentation, and that conceptual plan shows what can be done on the property. Once again, that shows, I think, some office on the front, and then something like a senior housing on the back. And that's why we wanted to go neighborhood commercial. We see this as a good place for senior housing. We're not limiting it to that, because office could go back there too. But we see it as a good place for senior housing because it's off the street, it's behind the water, it's isolated, it's not noisy. And we can do that in NC because we can downzone. We can down-use in NC to any of those cumulative uses beneath NC. If a rezoning is appropriate, is your next criterion, is the requested zoning district considered to be more appropriate from the township's perspective than another zoning district? Well, yeah, I think that goes without saying, because you said you want this to be NC. We're simply doing, as Mr. Hoffman said, what you have asked us to do. If you wanted another zoning district there, you would have put another zoning district in your master plan. The next one is asks if this is a request for a specific use, is rezoning the land more appropriate than amending the list of permitted uses in the current district? And that answer is no, because this is not a request for a specific use. So the predicate of that doesn't apply here. Has this request been submitted in the previous year? The answer is no, it has not been submitted in the previous year. The reason you have that in your ordinance, you don't want somebody coming in here and weekly and asking for the same thing and getting turned down again and wasting your money and wasting your experts' money and Mr. Smith's time reviewing applications. So no, so we meet that criterion as well. Then the last one is an offer of conditions submitted as part of conditional rezoning, which bears a reasonable and rational relationship to the property for which rezoning is requested. I think that makes sense. We're doing a conditional rezoning here. We couldn't do that before the new Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. You simply couldn't walk in and say, well, we'd like this zoned to NC, and all we're going to do is a house. You couldn't do that. Now you can do conditions, and that's a big change in Michigan law. And so we have to offer those conditions. That is, it's not something that the planning commission or the board says, why don't you give us this, and then we'll grant you rezoning. It puts the onus upon the applicant to make the offer of conditions, and that's what we've done today. What we're doing is, we're requesting that township change the zoning to NC, okay, with the following conditions, and this is under section 405 of the zoning act. Number one, there be no use of the property for any, these uses are uses that I tick off that you can do in NC. If it's zoned NC, these are principal permitted uses, and we're saying, we're carving these out. No wind energy conversion systems, regardless of height. No use of the property for any accessory use or storage of hazardous materials. No use of the property for any retail establishments or shopping centers in excess of 20,000 square feet. That's actually special use. There will be no use of the property for any automobile convenience or gas stations. No use of the property for any automobile maintenance or service establishments. No use of the back half of the property for any restaurants with drive-in or drive-through service. No use of the back half of the property for any accessory outdoor display. And the ordinance right now requires a 50-foot rear yard setback for buildings. We want to extend that to apply that 50-foot rear yard setback to no above-ground improvements, including asphalt 3 inches tall. So there'd be nothing in the back 50 feet except maybe trees. And we can execute, in order to implement that, in addition to the condition being imposed on the change in the ordinance that is on the map, we can execute a conservation easement that's in perpetuity to take care of things like that. So there are other factors that you're entitled to ask us about too, and the last time we were here, nobody identified any other relevant factors. Now, I understand in every rezoning, there's always going to be opposition. Okay? But this isn't a popularity contest, and it's not a contest, and I don't mean that in any sort of demeaning way. It's simply not a matter of saying 12 people are against it and one's for it, therefore the 12 must win. This is about law. I mean, we hear about the dearth of teaching in civics these years. Nobody knows civics anymore. Well, this is basic civics. Basic civics says, what does the law say, and do we obey the law or not? Not do we power our way through and say, regardless of the law, this is what we want. Just like I would not have the right to come in here and say, your master plan calls for this to be NC, but I want to put industrial there. It's just not in accordance with the master plan and not in accordance with state law. So I appreciate you hearing me. I'll answer any questions you have. If you hear items that people who oppose this need answers to, I'll be glad to address those too, as will Mr. Manser and Mr. Odglin.
I'm going to ask you for clarification on item 6.
Of the conditions?
Yes. It
Yes.
says there will be no use of the back half of the property for any restaurants with drive-in or drive-through service. So you're excluding or offering as one of your conditions no drive-through,
Yes.
but you're not excluding, I presume, a restaurant.
No.
Okay,
That's not what we've
just
offered.
wanted clarification
Yeah.
on the wording that was,
Yeah, I probably could have worded that better, couldn't I?
just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
I actually
what you're
pulled that language out of the ordinance.
Well, that explains it. Okay.
I had to blame somebody.
All right, Mr. Smith, from your standpoint, do you want to talk about process or? So just like from an overview, tonight, the planning commission will make a decision as to whether to send this to the township board for consideration.
Correct.
If it goes to the township board and they make a decision that, yeah, we think this is the right thing, what's the process from there? That's, I guess, more of what I'm.
What's the process if the township board approves it? If it's
Yes.
recommended for approval here and then approved at the township board?
Yes, I just want to understand that this
will not be completely wide open because there will be, I guess I'm leading the witness here. There will be
Site plan review
specific site
could be the next
what they want.
step if they decide that that's the next step that they want to take, yes.
That's where the township has, I guess, a lot more input.
The planning commissioners have a lot more input at that step for setbacks, even though they've already extended what we already require as a minimum. Landscaping, type of building materials,
So there'll be a preliminary and a final site plan if this,
if this gets pushed forward and approved at the township board level, yes.
any questions from planning commission members at this point? Mr. Andre?
We do these questions now or after public hearing?
Well, it's any questions for Mr. Reisig or anyone else that you might want clarified at this point, or if you
My
want-
questions are probably with the process and with staff. I think now is an appropriate time or later.
Yeah.
Right now? Okay. So I'm probably direct these questions to staff. Can you give us, Mr. Reisig talked a lot about the master plan, continuously referencing back to that. Can you give a Reader's Digest 30-second identification of what the master plan is and that process of how that document, how we arrive at that as a township? 30 seconds.
I'm gonna defer to Jill on this one as our planning consultant. I think she can give a more clear and concise answer.
So the 30-second summary of how we get the
limit you to
township's
3
master
minutes.
plan?
How's that?
Well, I think Mr. Reisig did outline the process pretty thoroughly in terms of the requirements of the Michigan State Planning Enabling Act, which is a provision in the state law that requires the township to review its master plan every 5 years. The master plan is the township's guiding document for making land use decisions like a rezoning request like this one, but other things too, including special land uses and other decisions relating to the use of land in the township. So it's important to have an updated master plan, and that's why the state says we have to review it every 5 years. We don't need to change it, but frequently we do. We find that conditions have changed over time, that we have new ideas for new areas of the community, and we do tend to, the township has a pretty rigorous history of making sure that that master plan is updated, which might be one little argument I would have with Mr. Reisig's comment that the courts would throw out the idea of the master plan. It's really one of the things that they do look for, is that the community has a current master plan, because the master plan then is the guiding document for the zoning ordinance. So the master plan is our guiding document, the zoning ordinance is our rule of law, and that was indicated here.
Perfect.
You want me to?
Thank you.
All right.
And then as part of that process, if those aren't aware, it's a prolonged process. It takes months, even years. Is
It
that
does.
correct?
Typically, it takes about a year, maybe a little bit longer.
Okay.
This process went a little bit beyond that because, as you may recall, or you may not know, but there was a different consultant that helped the township with that master plan process, and then there were some additional changes needed, and we came back on board and helped the township. We revisited some of those areas with the Planning Commission.
And I think that was in 2021 when that was adopted, fall of 2021?
Yes.
Okay, so.
In addition to the public input that was gleaned during that original process during 2020, there was a survey done, there were some other presentations. I think Mr. Yancho noted that there were some presentations made to the high schools to get student involvement. In addition to those things, there were, in fact, 2 public hearings on the master plan, one in, I believe, December of 2020, and then a subsequent one, I think it was in September of 2021. And with both of those, there were the required review periods. So the first one had a 63-day review period. There were some amendments, and there was a 42-day review period after that. So there was a good amount of time available in that process.
So there's ample, I mean, there's notifications, there's public notifications There's public meetings where anybody can attend. This is an ongoing process.
It is an ongoing process, and just to clarify, or maybe to help the residents that are here understand, this doesn't, like you got a notification of this property because this is a legal action that's being requested, the master plan does not go to every single resident typically in terms of mailing. That would have been out on the township's website, and I don't know, to be honest, how that was dispersed earlier, but typically, that's how it's done. It's on the Facebook page, it's on the website, it's put out in the local paper, it's discussed, and to your point, all meetings of any of the public bodies in the township are always open to the public.
Okay.
And the agendas are always posted online before the meetings.
Perfect. Then one of the things that I wanted to be clear on was what our roles and responsibilities are as a planning commission. So I took a look on the township website today, and it's very clear. It says as far as the responsibilities, the planning commission has the ability to review, approve or deny all special land uses, site plans, and host all public hearings. The planning commission also has the ability to recommend approval or denial for the rezoning cases to the township board. Seems pretty clear. Now, as part of anything here or within the ordinance or master plan, any other documents of the township, is there anything that allows this body to amend the master plan?
The master plan is the responsibility of the planning commission.
Right.
So yes,
But is it allow us to amend it at this time?
on the fly, no.
Okay,
Not here.
that's what I want to know. Can we, yes,
There's that whole process that I described would go over again. If you wanted to.
exactly.
if you
And that's
said
in
you wanted
another
to-
five
you wanted to amend
years
the
or
master
so.
plan, you would have to send out a notice
Right.
of intent to plan to all the communities, go through your process, make your changes, send it out again for, depending on the size of the scope of the amendment, a 42 or 63-day review period, hold a public hearing, and then take action again.
So we don't have the ability to amend it tonight, is that correct? Okay. And then, a couple other things, is part of the rezoning, and conditional rezoning, is there a site plan required or a specific use that has to be required as part of the application?
No.
Okay. Then, one last thing is, and I'm sure everybody's aware of it, and there are developmental conditions that are challenging to this piece of property. We know that there's a pond, we know there's wetlands, we know all that. Is that within the scope of our consideration for a rezoning?
Yes.
Okay. Is that, now with that, are those items that can also be addressed at a site plan when it comes to permitting? Because we don't permit wetlands.
Correct.
Okay. We don't permit the driveway, road commission.
Correct. That's right.
We don't permit the stormwater management when it comes to the drain commission, is that correct?
Right. I believe
Okay, we don't permit,
review those, though.
right, the water and the sewer. We have input as a township, but ultimately the permitting comes through those agencies. And the same thing with the water and sewer. So there's ample other agencies that would have their hands in this
Protect some of those
process.
things that you're talking about, yes.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
And if I could I just want to jump in again, just for the benefit of the residents, in case that there was any fuzziness on this. When an applicant comes in and they offer conditions for their rezoning, this is a kind of a quirk of Michigan law that the applicant is allowed to put conditions on, but the planning commission is not allowed to ask for conditions. So it's kind of a odd little tweak of the law. It's there to help protect the applicant from undue, I guess, burdens of conditions on a rezoning request. So to the point that those conditions were read by Mr. Reisig, those 8 conditions, they can always add more conditions. If they feel that that's warranted, they could do that tonight. If they took any of them away, they would have to come back and have another public hearing. So I just offer that just as a point of clarification, just so everybody understands.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Johnson, I believe you had your hand up.
2 things. First, when we did notification, we sent that out for the master plan when we were doing our public hearings. We sent that out in the tax bills, didn't we? If I'm not mistaken, didn't that happen? Or we talked about it?
I'm not sure if
I
that,
sent the tax bills out, so I couldn't tell.
Right,
It's in the newsletter, too.
Yeah, I think, it was, okay, maybe it was in the newsletter then went in the tax bill, is what I'm thinking of. But, okay.
Yes.
And then second, I was writing kind of quick, trying to keep up with your conditions. When you mentioned retail, was it a $20,000 or was it a 20,000 square feet?
$20,000 is a good dinner now. isn't
Right,
it?
yeah.
No, 20,000 square feet.
Okay.
20,000 square feet is allowed in NC as a principal permitted use. If you're going to go over 20,000, it's a special use. I'm basically saying we're never going to ask for a special use for an NC use in excess of 20,000, the
Gotcha.
center in excess of 20,000 square feet.
Okay.
We've cut that special use out.
Okay.
Mr. Anderson?
Yeah,
Do you have a copy of this? I can give you my copy.
Yeah, it's,
Oh, no, I believe I do, yeah.
it's the document on your right.
Sorry, I was just listening, trying to pay attention.
You made this presentation to us last month, and you voluntarily withdrew it because we have a full board here and full commission. But I thought at that time, and I think I expressed at that time too, my concern was the application was kind of vague as to what the property used for. And I want, Mr. Smith, I want your input on this one. As I read tonight, you provided us a list of what it won't be, but just still a little bit vague on what it will be. On the 8 items pertaining to this list, would the first 4 items, without any additional special rezoning, even be permitted in neighborhood commercial anyway?
I pulled these right out of the neighborhood commercial list of uses.
Well, yeah, okay. Wind energy conservation, neighborhood commercial?
Neighborhood commercial is a special land use, yes.
So that would require a special land use over and above just the rezoning,
Correct.
okay? Gas stations, I know would be over and above this conditional rezoning as well. It would be allowed, but it's an additional permit.
Correct.
Okay. And if we approve it tonight, 3 years from now, an applicant could come forward with a proposal to put a gasoline service station in that property, and we'd have to consider that at that time with an additional rezoning. It wouldn't be granted permanently. That could still change in the future.
This is, if these conditions are approved, this is going to be a recorded document at the Register of Deeds. This is binding, legally binding. So it, into perpetuity.
Okay.
Except that a petitioner could come before you and request a new rezoning.
Correct, yes.
That's possible.
They could try for something new, but these conditions.
If the conditions aren't met, the property would revert back to the original rezoning. And you might remember this happened, it's been a while, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. There was a parcel that had some conditions attached to the rezoning and it,
Is the Applebee's,
yeah.
where Nissan is now? Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments from planning commission before we go to public hearing? Mr. Yancho?
Yes, I'd like to just mention to all the planning commissioners, I think you've all gotten a copy of the planning commissioner's guidebook. And on page 12, it says, regardless of how many people show up to oppose or support a project, you must represent the long-term interests of the entire community, not just those at the public hearing.
Okay. Anything else from our planners or before we?
No, I think I said my piece at the previous meeting. This is a very extensive, well thought out application, one of the most thorough applications I've ever seen, and I've been doing this for 15 years.
Okay, so we're gonna go to the public, ask for your comments. We've got a stack here of people that have requested to speak. So we're gonna, I guess, call, yep.
You need to timestamp the public hearing that you open it, please.
Open the public hearing at
7:46.
PM. Okay.
You good with
There we
that?
go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, we weren't able to limit the applicant to 3 minutes, but we are limiting the public to 3 minutes each, so you've all got a chance to speak. We'll start, Mr. Yancho, if you could call names.
Well, I'll just call them in the order that I've got them here. Lelaine Kilborn.
Break the ice.
Okay, good evening.
They don't have to give their address.
Bring it way down. Do you want me to state my name and address again, or?
Just your name would be good. Even if you just want to use your
Kilborn?
first name, that's fine. We don't need the address at this time.
Okay, I don't really have a dog in the fight, but I do want to support the residents. I don't believe you should be putting commercial, high density, anything like that within a residential area. And I know that just because something is master planned doesn't mean you have to do that. It's just a future guidance. And really, you're kind of selling out, you've been selling out the township and all the property, and you're getting rid of the reason why people wanted to come to Grand Blanc and wanted to live here. And just remember, once land is gone, it's gone. You can't ever get it back. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Monica Shapiro.
First thing that I have to say is that no matter what Mr. Reisig wants you to believe, what Mr. Andre decided is true, the master plan is not a zoning document. It is a guide. And yes, we all had lots of ample notice. We all were able to weigh in. We made surveys. But the plot-by-plot stuff was kind of slipped in according to special interests, as it always is. It didn't take into account these residents. And we're always able to come in after the fact and say, no, we don't want this zoning change. It was specified in the master plan, but people don't want it, and you should listen to the people. Because who benefits from this rezoning? The residents have been told that their property values will go down $100,000 if this rezoning happens. They're not benefiting. But the speculator who's paid $120,000 for the property and hopes to make a big profit of $600,000, he benefits. The residents have things they don't want next to their beautiful properties, and they lose their property value. That's a distinct negative to the township. And then the final thing I have to say is, when do residents have a voice in the zoning process? Is it only at the master planning stage? You have to come to all those meetings, you have to sit through the whole thing and make sure that nothing gets by you? Are they trying that hard to trick the residents? That they, you have a voice, but you don't really have a voice because, hey, we knew we were going to make sure that Mr. Reisig could get his profit out of this property, so we're just going to sneak that in, and when the residents come and they don't want it, too bad, you have no voice. And I think that's a shame. I think that you should listen to residents who live there. And again, to her point, the township has been ignoring what residents want and doing things just because it makes a profit for whoever is involved in the property changing hands. It's not looking at what makes life worth living here in Grand Blanc Township ever. And it's poor planning down the line. Anyone who lives here will say this is a poorly planned community and it doesn't care about its residents. And putting commercial property next to these beautiful homes is a travesty.
Absolutely. Thank you for your comments. Next.
Pardon me. Carl Heiser.
I see a lot of people, but their hair is grayer than it was several years back. My name is Carl Heiser. I live at 5186 Green Meadows, Grand Blanc. My wife and I have been a resident of the township since 1975. I have a business. I'm a certified public accountant and a forensic accountant for over 40 years. My business is in the city. So I have the pleasure of paying taxes to the city and to the township. So the reason I'm coming forward on this, and by the way, there are two sides to every story. I think Mr. Reisig gave a presentation that was obviously to convince you to approve this. Another thing I mentioned too, one thing I didn't like, there was a reference to Jay Hoffman and what he said and what he meant. He's not here to rebut or agree. So where I'm coming from here is, to me, as I'm looking at this, I think the Planning Commission has a very important job, and overall, I've been around the township for a number of years, and I think it's really moving forward. There's always challenges, and the hardest thing to say is no. I'm just telling you it's no. What really, I think by approving this, you're setting a dangerous precedence. It says here, and this has to do with the Planning Commission and the narrative prepared by the people from the southern Grand Blanc neighborhoods. It said here, as the residents and stakeholders feel, be to limit the R1 zoning to R1 until there is a direct rejected proposal presented by the landowner. And we don't have a direct, in my opinion, yet it is. It's sort of like having a wedding, inviting everybody, but no one knows who the bride is. Okay? You don't know the person. It's the shadow. You're being asked to vote yes on the shadow, and you're setting a dangerous precedence by doing this.
30 seconds left. Just want to let you know.
Okay, thank you. So your decision tonight, if you go forward, this is going to be a classic case for other violations or changes or sympathy for a proposal. I think this has to be more specific, and that's the tough part. I don't think you're breaking the law. I don't think that it's intentional here. We're having good open discussion, and I say no, and let's find out who's behind this. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Spencer Howell.
Let the record show that Mr. Hoffman has joined us.
My apologies. I'm actually lucky to be here, so go ahead.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'll let Mr. Hoffman collect himself for a minute or two. Go ahead.
No, apologies. Thank you.
No, you're fine. Thank you for your attention, Mr. Yellings. I think last time I spoke, I was a very baptism by fire. I had no idea about the process. I came here with a lot of questions. I was very disappointed when a lot of those questions were not answered. And so a group of neighbors came away from this, and we've done nothing but ask questions for the last 4 weeks. We have formed opinions based on the answers that we've gotten, and we've gotten a massive response from the community. What you have before you is a formal letter that we typed up as a group of residents representing a few hundred folks, and some of the folks that are here tonight will attest to who they spoke with and how, but I personally talked to just about the entire sub of the preserve, which is located directly across the street from this property. I did not meet one single person, and I'm talking in today's political landscape, one single person that was for this. Now, of course, we that live at the south end of Grand Blanc, we kind of have a little more at stake than folks, just asking general folks downtown. So I will admit that my audience was a little biased, maybe. But what I do take issue with Mr. Reitzig's comment today, he kept emphasizing must. And I think Mr. Andre was trying to clarify, hey, I went back and I read today, like, what can we do, what can't we do? And I just want to help you guys realize that you are empowered today to say yes or no without the fear of any kind of a legal reprisal or otherwise. You guys sit here, and maybe you're aware of this already, and maybe you're not, but you sit here as a major part of the process. And it's a very important part of the process for the public to be able to come, not just offer our opinions, but point out things that maybe you guys missed, or maybe with the daily comings and goings, everything you deal with, you may not have considered. So I invite you to read through, as carefully as you can, these issues that we have and the points that we've made on the back. I don't ask they be read into the record, but I would ask you to carefully consider that and to just to remember that there would be no need for you guys if you didn't have a say in what happens, yes or no, today. They would just simply hand him the application. He would say, based on the 13 points and based on our administration, we believe that it's appropriate for this area. And then it would go to the township board. But they formed this for you guys to interpret the master plan in a way that if not too many people were worried about it, we wouldn't have a few hundred signatures. We wouldn't have, 60 people at a meeting tonight. When you guys admitted at the last meeting that you hardly ever see anybody at all. So thank you for your consideration.
Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the help.
So I live in the Preserve of Grand Blanc off Scenic Ridge Boulevard. I'm Rachel Erkfritz. I've got some notes here, so bear with me. So where does it end? So what does this do for our community? We talk communities, families, strong neighborhoods. What does it bring to the community? Like what does it bring? And we've elected you guys to make decisions on our behalf, and we don't want this. I've got 3 children. We came here to Grand Blanc because of the community, and I don't see this being beneficial for my family and future families. Stuff like this makes people move, and we want to stay. So, thank you for your time.
David Shang. Did I say that right? David.
I've heard it all. I'm Dave Schoen. I live at 9300 Warwick Meadows. I was here last time and talked to you guys. Jeremy asked me to make it quick last time, so I'm going to make it quick this time. From the presenter as to why you should recommend the zoning change, it says on point C of the 13 points that current zoning prohibits a reasonable profit. I know Mr. Rissick went into that a little more today, but I challenged the point. I offered Mr. Ogland, who I know, double the price he paid in 2018 to buy the property, which that stands still. I would still do that. So that amounts to about 20% annual return on that property, and I think that's a reasonable return in the investment. He told me it would take $600,000. He would sell it to me today, which is over 100% return annually. Additionally, we in the neighborhood checked with an appraiser and a few realtors that agreed there are retail buildings. If they're bordering our property, we could count on a 20% reduction in the values of the property. The State Zoning Act says, and I read it from top to bottom, so you guys know, that you guys are responsible for protecting the existing residents' values or the residential values from decreasing when making zoning changes. So if we have a value and you come in and make a zoning change and our values go down, to me, from that act, it looked like that's basically against their mandate. If you follow this zoning change, you're obviously in favor of gigantic profits for the newcomers. And I know Mr. Ogland is not a newcomer, but when I look at the paperwork, there's a guy named Robert Booher that is president of this corporation. And I assume he's from Fenton, so I assume he is going to benefit from your decision if you say yes. So please don't downgrade Grand Blanc, and please vote no to the rezoning proposal. One other thing, we had a meeting with Dennis Lamata this week, and he said that the master plan is just a guide, not legally binding.
Thank you. Next.
Debbie Pack.
Hi, my name is Debbie Pack. I live at 9362 Warwick Meadows. And I would just like to say, maybe present, Mr. Reisig presented a very legalistic explanation view, and I'm sure the legal requirements are met, but there's more to it than just the legality, because there are people involved. And as the young lady spoke to a few minutes ago, we moved here. We've been in our house for 35 years, and our kids are gone. They've left the area. We have no family here. We have friends, but no family. There's really no reason for us to say, but we like our house, and we like the privacy. I don't expect that things won't ever change, but as Dave alluded to, the change, not all change is good. And this change would downgrade our property values, and we are obviously not happy about that. And I'd just like to end with a quote. It's from Mark Twain, and he says that citizenship is what makes a republic. Monarchies can get along without it. What keeps a republic on its legs is good citizenship. We're being good citizens tonight. We are expressing our disfavor for the plan to change the zone, and I hope that you will take that into consideration. We're a small representation of a lot of people that don't want this change.
We definitely appreciate you being here this evening. Thank you.
Larry Pack?
Well, since our last meeting, we've been beating the sidewalks. I've interviewed the association presidents at Warwick Hills, at Braymore, at Woodfield, and at Del Webb. And all the people I've talked to probably hundreds, represented hundreds of people in these neighborhoods, including our neighborhood, and no one, I did not hear one person in favor of this proposal, not one. No one would take Mr. Rizik's side on this. So that represents a lot of people. I don't know how many, but you know, at Del Webb alone, that's probably 800 people that live there. So I think you should consider the wishes and the feelings of your citizens, and you should take that very, very, very carefully. Good government protects private property. That is its number one job, and I hope you consider that. When we met with Jeremy the other day, we were told that there was a master plan in 2019 and was redone in 2021. Well, isn't that right, Jeremy? I think it's 2021.
Started in 29 and fully approved in 21.
21. Well, during 21, if you remember, that was COVID, and this place was locked down, and everything was locked down. So for this being open for discussion, and I just think it was very difficult for people to get and come to a meeting like this during that time. And we lived right in that area. We were never notified. Of course, maybe it was in the tax bill, but you would think that someone would notify the people that live directly on the property line of the property that's in question, and we were never notified. So I hope you give this consideration. I wouldn't downgrade residential Grand Blanc. I think it's a nice community, and our community, our residential community, is really the gateway to Grand Blanc and the gateway to the county. It's your face, and you cobble it up by doing things that people don't want or things that are a little bit out of order. It sends a loud message to people that are coming up I-75 or from Clarkston or some of these other areas. And if you look at these areas, their downtown development is outside of the residential areas. If you go to any of these areas, Rochester Hills or Clarkston, any of these areas, Brighton, you don't see commercial development right in the middle of a residential area, right in the heart of it. Also, if you're thinking about a nursing home, there was a man killed on Baldwin Road a few weeks ago who got loose one night. He was a person that was in memory care at the nursing home in the south side, and he was out wandering around on Baldwin Road, and he was hit by a car and killed. So that's something to think about when you're thinking about another nursing home.
Thank you.
Stephen Farvand? Stephen? Stefano. Stefanu?
Euler.
Stephanie, okay. Hard to read that. Peggy Klingsmith.
Hello, I'm Peggy Klingsmith. I live at 9351 Robinwood Drive. I've been there for 45 years. It's an awesome little community. Most of the people are here tonight are from Green Meadow, Knollwood subdivision. I was before this township board 30 years ago protesting Augusta Park. And the pond that's on South Saginaw Street by Augusta Park was our concern at that time. Fortunately for us, we won the zoning. It was denied. However, Mr. McGurk had enough money to go to court and convince a judge it was his property and he could do with what he wanted. We are now living with that particular decision. One of the things the builder, Mr. McGurk, promised to do when he built Augusta Park was put in berms, plant trees, prevent the water from coming into our subdivision. That has not happened, and the township has not enforced it. And we've tried and tried and tried for the last 10 years. And because of that, we have 2 houses that flood every time we have a serious rain. It's a situation that you can't really foresee unless you've lived through it and know what's going on. For instance, my neighbor built a pole barn, and now my backyard floods because the metal roof puts all the water in my backyard. And then, of course, if my backyard floods, it comes into my basement. That's a problem that I have to deal with, and I do. However, I think that when you start dealing with moving the wetlands around, like they did the pond that's in Green Knoll, we don't have sewers in there, we have ditches. And our ditches go into that pond. And that was a retention pond, and it was disturbed. And now because it's been disturbed, all the dirt is piling up in the middle of the pond and making an island and pushing the water into the subdivision. So I just think that we need to look at the long-term effects of some of these things that happen. It's difficult to predict. It's difficult to know what's going to happen. But let's let the wetlands speak for themselves, stay where they are, and be what they need to be. And I don't think we should downgrade our community anymore by creating commercial development. We've got a lot of ways to go down Baldwin Road and Holly Road without taking the wetlands away. Thank you very much for your time.
Louise Dawson?
Hi, my name is Louise Dawson, and I've been in the Green Knoll subdivision since 1988. Moved there because it was beautiful and rural. I'm opposed to this development. I read almost every 172 pages of that master plan since I was here last, and nowhere does it say that it can be this commercial development that they want to do. I'm looking at this right here, and it's telling me that it's rated for single-family residential district, and I believe it should be stayed that way, especially for the people whose property butts right up to that. It will affect their values. I'm worried about more noise and traffic in the area, and we're all clamoring for more residential areas. Why take it away for a commercial development? I moved here because I like the rural. They say we're a bedroom community, and I think the planning needs to be more carefully done. Thank you.
John? You, yes. I'm not going to try this again.
Thank you, Honorable Commission, for allowing me to address you. My name is John Runovich Jr. I live at 5152 Sunderland Drive. It's Lot 20 in Green Knoll subdivision. I want to make 3 points. First, the ponds in the wetlands on Baldwin Road have been there forever. I've been in the township over 60 years, and they've been in there, and they've never been disturbed. The problem with this land has not been created by the master plan that we created, but rather by nature, probably in the Ice Age. The second point I want to make is that the people that have owned this land prior to the current owners have had ample opportunity to create a situation where the 2 parcels could be developed. The house immediately to the east has been sold 3 times at least in the last 40 years. And the first time, it was kind of a fire sale. It was kind of beat up. The people bought it, refurbished it, and so on and so forth. So the people have had an opportunity, if they wanted to change the situation in terms of getting to the land. The last point I want to make is I don't think there's any basis at all for this rezoning classification. This land is perfectly capable of being developed as single-family land. It can be sold to the people immediately around, and they can add it to their situation. Driveways can be established either on an easement on either side, because after all, there's access from the west and the east, and you can work with the Department of Natural Resources to establish a driveway to come in to service those 2 pieces of land. I think they could be developed as a single-family plan, just as the master plan calls for. What we've got going on here is some people that are trying to make a huge amount of money at the expense of the owners in that area who have been here for 50 years and who have worked their whole life to pay for their house. I think that this should not be passed, and don't downgrade Grand Blanc Township. Please vote no on this zoning proposal because there's no basis for it.
Christina Clausen?
Good evening. My name's Christine Clausen. I live at 9338 Green Tree Drive in Green Knoll subdivision. Our subdivision is quite small. I believe it is 47 homes, and behind our subdivision are some private homes as well. And I am here to speak out to say that I do think we would be making a huge mistake in changing and rezoning to neighborhood commercial. It was meant to be residential, and I do fear for my fellow subdivision families that we will all lose value in our own properties because of a rezoning to neighborhood commercial. I plead with you to not rezone, don't downgrade our residential Grand Blanc, and please vote no on this rezoning proposal.
Tom Booth?
Good evening. My name's Tom Booth. I live at 5189 Sunland, which is part of the Green Knoll subdivision. My family has lived there for almost 40 years, and we have a beautiful, peaceful neighborhood and great neighbors. We enjoy the natural setting and the wildlife that encompass in that area. I've discussed the proposal of rezoning with most of the neighbors in the neighborhood, and universally, I'm getting the fact that they don't want it. We know that it will downgrade the value of our homes, it will increase the noise of the subdivision, and I'm confident, as we talked about the last time, that these two properties are right in the middle of 7 other large pieces of property. And once you do these two, I'm sure very shortly, you're going to have the other 7 coming in to get that whole section from Ruby Street down to Saginaw changed over to neighborhood commercial. We don't want the Baldwin to Saginaw area turned into another area like happened with Irish between Court Street and Lapeer. Many of the areas in the township are already zoned neighborhood commercial, and I think they should be the ones where that business goes to. I strongly oppose the rezoning and politely ask you to don't downgrade the residential Grand Blanc, and please vote no on this rezoning issue.
Thank you.
Joe Kaczynski?
I'm Joe Kaczynski. I live at 5212 Sunland. We moved here because of the neighborhood, because of the property, because of the wildlife, the woodlands, the wetlands. We think it would be very not advantageous at all for this rezoning to take place. Please don't downgrade residential Grand Blanc. Please vote no. Thank you.
April Jeffrey.
Hi, my name is April. I live in the Preserve of Grand Blanc. Everybody's pretty much touched on a lot of the thoughts that I had already also. My things that I'm worried about is, you know, that area already, it's been so developed to the west, and we have all these big trucks that come through there. It's already busy as it is. We put another business opportunity behind all these homes. We don't know what's going in there. It's very vague. I still don't know, and I may be out of the loop because I didn't come to previous meetings. That may be on me, but where does this stop, though? You're expanding and expanding. We've got all these, my neighborhood alone has over 200 homes, and there are so many children. We have people that came here because they wanted to raise their families. They wanted to be in this community. My daughter just graduated. There's nothing that's going to keep us here. We will move if this happens. And we'll take our business, our community spending. There's other people that will do the same thing, and it's not something that we would want to do, but it's a fact. People will do that. The community will no longer be the community. They will want to leave. And voting for this is a very bad thing, I think. I think it would be remiss if it was. There's no reason. There's plenty of other land opportunities. Someone's already touched on that. It was, if he could make a profit, he's been offered that. And yet he still wants to persist for that because he's going to make a bigger profit that way. There's other land in the general area that is zoned correctly for what his purposes may be. We don't even know what it fully is going to be. I just think that it's really bad idea to vote just because he says you must, based on what he's pulled out of the master plan guidance. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the people that have submitted a public comment card. Is there anybody else that wants to speak? Do you have?
I would like to speak. I got here 2 minutes late.
All right, just at the end, if you can write down your name on one of the sheets.
I will, certainly.
Go ahead.
My name is Gary Kramer. I live in Braemore subdivision. I was born and raised in Grand Blanc. I started out as a mechanic at Yerke Chevrolet, which is now a carpet sales across from Holy Family. People don't come to Grand Blanc for commercial buildings, gas stations, and the like. They come to Grand Blanc because it's a beautiful community to build a house in a residential area. They don't expect it to be rezoned so somebody can make a lot of money. And believe me, that's the only reason that anybody wants this rezoned is because it's going to line their pockets. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother to even come here. And just think about that. Don't destroy a nice town like Grand Blanc with residential areas. I've drove back in there. It's beautiful. You put all this residential stuff back, or all this commercial stuff back in there, it's just going to be another Pontiac, Michigan. Don't do it. Just plain outright say, no, we're not going to do it. And the people don't want it. I've not talked to one person who wants this done. Not one. But I've talked to 50 or 100 who don't want it done. So you should listen to me. I'm telling you the truth. I'm not a liar. I've lived here my whole life. There's only one reason they want to change this. It's because somebody wants to make a pile of money at everybody else's expense. That's all I got to say. Don't destroy your own community, because if you vote yes for this, that's a step in that direction.
Yeah, we're going to need you to fill out a card with at least just fill in your name.
Good evening. Hi, my name is John Juarez. I live at 9327 Green Tree Drive, along with a lot of my neighbors here. My family and I moved here in 2006, and at the time our boys were probably a year and a half and 2.5 years old, and we specifically picked this neighborhood because it felt like home. It's full of beautiful green lawns, lots of trees. The street I live on is called Green Tree. And we wanted an idyllic setting to raise our boys in, where they could run and play and be boys. And we've been able to do that. They're now 19 and 20 years old. And my concern, I can't really add anything to anybody, but anyone else, the facts and thoughts that anyone else has brought forward. But I just want to add my name on the record that I'm fully against this proposal. And I agree that one of the things I've loved about Grand Blanc, especially this part of Grand Blanc, is the rural feel that it has, but we're very close to the rest of the things that Grand Blanc has to offer. Let's not let the commercial part of Grand Blanc continue to encroach into what has made it a special place for people to raise their families for decades. And so I just want to put my name out there and implore you to please consider the voices that you've heard of your neighbors to vote no on this. Thank you.
Thank you. At least just need your name. We don't need you to fill out the rest of it, just kind of as a record. Did we get everyone who wanted to speak this evening? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Callie. I live in the Preserve, 10352 Edgewater Trail. My husband and I moved here about 2 years ago, and we looked at many different areas. We were very fortunate and blessed to find a home in the Preserve that felt safe. And if you add this into a commercial area, I feel like more traffic is going to happen. There's 2 entrances in the Preserve that people are just going to cut through. There's children that are playing in the streets, and my husband and I, along with my fellow neighbors, will definitely move. I'd like to start a family here, but you're not going to have many families that are going to be started if you keep developing in this area. Thank you.
There's an extra blank one, if you'd like to get your name. Anyone else? All right, we're going to close the public hearing on this, bring it back up to the Planning Commission. Anything from planning consultants or planner at this time? Anyone else on the Planning Commission?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I have some comments. I've been on the Planning Commission probably around 10 years, and we we've had very few, actually, petitions for conditional zoning, but in each one of them, the applicant has indicated or specifically stated what the use is that they are going to, and vote for that particular piece of property, what a very specific condition on how they want it developed. Although apparently it is possible, apparently under the zoning ordinance, to have what I'm considering kind of negative conditional zoning, not telling, the applicant is not indicating what specific use they are asking for, but they're telling us what the uses that they won't do. Of course, when you look at the particular, the number of uses for the neighborhood commercial, there's dozens and dozens of potential uses. And that's one of the things that concerns me, and I'm obviously concerns the folks who in the audience, is that there's no way of knowing what particular use there is going to be. And I understand their concern in that regard. But apparently the applicant is not required under their petition to specify what use they're going to have. I think particularly in this situation where we have the parcel at issue surrounded by residential properties, I think it makes it more of a concern about what types of uses could be allowed. So that's a concern that I have. I also want to point out that when we do have a petition for a change in zoning, there are a number of criteria in the zoning ordinance that we're to look at. And one of the criteria, or one of the issues that we have to look at, is whether it's consistent with the master plan. However, that is only one of a number of factors that we are to consider. In other words, you don't automatically get your zoning change just because it's consistent with the master plan. So the other thing I want to do is I really want to compliment everybody in the audience for all the time and the work that you've put in, and you've done it in a very civil manner. And my only suggestion was, if you could have gotten this to us a little bit earlier, because we just had to read it through quickly when we got here this evening. So, but you have done a very good job of speaking out, exercising your rights to try to inform us of why you feel this is not appropriate. It's the democratic process, and very impressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Applicant, anything that you would like to add to?
Just a slight misunderstanding, but I think some of the speakers, I think a young lady named Louise said that she went through the master plan and nowhere in there does it show that this is supposed to be neighborhood commercial, that it's planned for neighborhood commercial. And she held up a map, and I think she was holding up the current land use map or the current zoning map. And if I'll stand corrected, I mean, Mr. Smith or Ms. Bem can tell me that I'm wrong, that the master plan calls this out on the future land use map as neighborhood commercial.
It does.
It does.
It does. And I guess I also wanted to say one thing. I think Jill corrected me. I said courts, I probably oversold it by saying courts really don't pay attention to the master plan. I think she's right. Courts do pay attention to the master plan. I think trial courts don't. Courts of appeals clearly do, because courts of appeals do a little more solid reasoning than trial courts do. Trial courts basically look at the economics of the situation. You do anything with the property, and that's where they focus, because they see people every day, and they have more realistic considerations than how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. So, once again, I'll answer any questions that you have about this rezone.
Mr. Hoffman?
I will once again apologize for my late, and more than anything, I don't know what was said before I got here, so I apologize for if I repeat things. So I was on the planning commission for about 15 years before Ms. Coulter was here, and while I was here, I stepped off for a little while and I was asked to come back on. One of the reasons why I left was because of the crowd, and you guys did not do this, but somebody in that crowd demanded that we wouldn't even, why would we even entertain a request? Why did we even look at the application? Well, we got to look at the applications because it's the law. If we just say, you just bring an application and say, we're not even going to entertain this, they'll get anything they want. I'm back, and I'm very grateful to be back. I love serving the community. I will tell you that this discussion is different when I'm in your seats and then when I'm back here. When I'm in your seats, I'm a citizen of this community, and I want the best for all the neighbors and things of that nature, and it's just what we're talking about. When I'm on this side of the table, I'm beholden by regulation. I'm beholden by obligations that I have to do along those lines. With that being said, I would like to ask, because a couple things that you guys asked us to do here is, vote no for the approval. We're not voting for an approval or disapproval on this. We don't even have that power. All we can do is push this up to the planning, to the township board, who, those are the people that were elected. We're appointed along those lines. Can the board, do they have wiggle room not to be sued? Because in the 25 years that I've been somewhat involved in this, what I've seen, in fact, I think it was brought up, if we deny something, it goes to court, and the court says, you got to do these things. I mean, it's pretty much a slam dunk. I mean, to me, the way I see this, the fastest way to have this development to actually go in is to say, we're not going to move it up to the board for approval. It's going to be an immediate, they're going to walk into the court tomorrow and they can do that. Yes, it is. 25 years of history behind me on that. So I know I don't have any wiggle room. Do they have any wiggle room to protect that? Do you know of?
Not that I'm aware of.
I guess I would just offer, your wiggle room is you can make you're making a recommendation. And you are making that recommendation based on your findings. You've listened to the comments made at the public hearing. You've listened to the applicant. You've studied the application. You're making a recommendation. The township board is likely to listen to your recommendation because they trust the planning commission. You do this work. And so there would be some, I think, concern if you made a recommendation and the township board went a different direction. But I can't really speak to necessarily, one way or the other in terms, I'm not the township attorney, so I would never.
In all my situations, I've never seen to the point where I would sit there and be able to stand on grounds to say no to something like this and not have the applicant sue us. I've never seen it happen. And by the way, not only sue, but win. Every time. So I don't know how I can put the township in that position where it's an automatic, they win anyway, and do whatever they want. No.
Excuse me.
No. All right, thank you. I just want to know if they had any wiggle room. I appreciate it.
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I was just saying, I just wanted to see if they had any wiggle room. So thank you.
Okay, so you're done.
Yep.
We've got to make a decision one way or the other here this evening. No one wants to stay here too late. It's rightly said that one of our responsibilities is to look at how we can best protect the residents. And I'm on the site plan review committee, and a lot of times, I should say the vast majority of the time, we look at things when we get the specific plan as to what we can do. How about if we put in a berm here, we can look at that, some of those kind of things. We've got setbacks, the closest any structure on this property would be at least 50 feet minimum from residential property. And residents, homes are not going to be right at the rear of their property. So there's some natural separation, but there's other things that we look at. And I don't know since this is a conditional rezoning, we can't automatically say you need to double your setback, right? We're limited until we get something specific. We go through the ordinance and do the best we can to make it a good development for everyone. One of the other things that we do is I understand your investment and your interest because your location to this property. One of the things we are tasked with is looking at what's best for the overall township as well. So that's what we have to consider as well. But, I don't know. Anybody else have any comments?
I have one I want to make too.
All right, let's go. Mr. Anderson.
And I'm just going to kind of address you guys. I'm 51 years old. I was born in Grand Blanc. Lived here my whole life, and I speak to everybody here. We serve up here because we all love Grand Blanc too. Grand Blanc's close to my heart. My wife and I got married, deciding we're going to raise our kids. Grand Blanc schools, no other choices. We're going to stay right here. So I love Grand Blanc. The house I was born in, my mother still owns today. Okay, she still lives there. When I was a kid growing up, Holly Road was a 2-lane road with dirt shoulders and a ditch. I would ride my bike up and down Holly Road. Now it's 5 lanes. I had to sit here on this bench right here and approve developments along Holly Road because the zoning matched and the laws required it. I had to sit on this bench and approve a gas station a half mile from my house when 200 residents in my neighborhood were telling me don't do it. I didn't do it because I wanted to. I didn't do it because I didn't care. Part of our job up here is to review everything, make sure the applicant crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's, and everything's legal. There are laws to this, and there are laws we have to follow, and yes, the township can get sued. I like to tell people part of what we do is, I guess, to make it real simple. You buy a house in a residential neighborhood, you can build a residential neighborhood. You buy a lot that's zoned for a future land use. We do this so you can't build, I think somebody referred to a cement factory. You can't build a cement factory next to a school. I have to look at this as, from your perspective, because I live here too, but I also have a job and a duty up here. And I've made decisions that have affected my property. What used to be a 10-acre field behind my mom's house is now condos. I understand. I feel you guys and where you're coming from. So that's what I just wanted to say.
Two things. Excuse me, sir. You had a chance. We understand there's not anyone in the audience that's for this. So we got Mr. Hoffman to want to speak.
And that's the type of things that got me off. So threats really don't work. The second thing is the two things.
Please.
The two things also, I think, is education. There's 2 types of rezoning. One that is already planned for and one that is not. The one that's not is the one that's very easy for us to take input and say, hey, what can we do and things of that nature. This, because it is in the future land, is really got our hands tied.
No.
We're going to ask you to not.
The second thing that I would recommend, and I'll ask, is there any way to, as far as the future land use map, is there a way that the community can demand a look at the future land use map? For example, tomorrow come in and say, you know what, because we're mandated to do it every 5 years, is it? Right? Can the community say, you know what, we don't like the future land use map? Trying to give an area here of control. Can they come in and say, we want this? Can they request it from the board, and then the board would have to deny it if they don't want to? But the community, because we on this board want what the community wants, and I think the board does too. So maybe that's an avenue for something like this not happening again, to the point where if you don't like the future land use map, ask it to be reviewed for future type of things. I don't know if it'll help in this case, but in the future, that's something that could be helpful.
Mr. Yancho?
I'd like to address that issue of the master plan. I was here on the planning commission when we redid the master plan. We begged the community for input. We begged people to attend. We posted in the newspaper. We sent out surveys. We did everything we could to get, and I think we had 7,000 responses. Is that correct?
750.
750. We had, so that's a considerable number of responses. But we worked hard to do that. I also have to say that I sympathize with all the people, especially those that have lived here for a long time or in this area for a long time that we're talking about. I lived on Baldwin Road. I lived on Baldwin Road starting in 1963. The preserve wasn't there. Del Webb wasn't there. Braymore wasn't there. Holly Hills behind us wasn't there. Vemco wasn't there. Genesis Hospital. I used to grow corn where Genesis Hospital is, and I used to grow corn where Woodfield is. And I used to grow corn where Knollwood subdivision, so, you know, I had a horse, and we rode our horses through all those places. And my children and grandchildren live in this community, but they don't have the same pleasures that I had because of change. Change is inevitable. People that live in Green Knoll, those houses were there, but and Warwick was there, but none of the other houses around us was there. It was all farmland, and my friends, we used to play baseball in the middle of Baldwin Road. Can you imagine that today? But I have to accept change, and I also have to protect all the residents of this township. That's my job, that's my duty, to protect all the residents, not just a group that lives in an area where they're unhappy with the changes. I think that the applicant is providing plenty of buffer area and accommodation. And I know that the Planning Commission and the Board Trustees will look at everything in depth to make sure that we do everything we can to protect your home values and your way of life.
Okay, anyone else on the plan?
No.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to piggyback on what Larry said. I think he said it nice. You know, we've all lived here a long time. I also have lived here my entire life. I'm a little older than Larry. I actually bought my parents' house that they paid $25,000 for back in the day. I paid $125,000 for that same house after all the development happened. So, you know, right or wrong, I heard a lot of people here today say their home values would go down. I don't know of any home values in Grand Blanc that's gone down in the 56 years that I've been here. Well, and I can be corrected. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but for the most part, they don't go down. They haven't. We, like Larry said, and like Jay said, we all love Grand Blanc. That's why we're up and sitting on this board. I was a planning commissioner several years back for 3 terms. I enjoyed this community so much, I ran for office. I won 2 terms until I decided I was tired of the political end of it. And then I was asked to come back here because of the background in planning. And again, it's just, I love giving back to my community. And I started when I was 10 years old in Boy Scouts, giving back to Grand Blanc. And here I am, almost 60, still doing it, and proud of it. There's 2 things I know my parents taught me: that everybody's got an opinion, and you can't make everybody happy. So that's one of our charges. We have to look at everything and make an informative decision. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Andre, did you have something?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion, please.
Before you do that, I've got a question. And that question is, we have 8 members here this evening. In order to move this to the township board, we need
5.
correct?
Yes.
Majority of the total members on the planning commission. Okay. I just wanted-
Majority present, but it's still majority, still 5. There's 9 total, but one's
Yeah,
missing,
that's
but we
what I
still
was
need 5 as a tiebreaker, yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a recommendation to, like to make a recommendation of approval to the Township Board in the case of ZC number 677, Paragon Development, conditional rezoning request to reclassify property from single-family residential district R1 to neighborhood commercial district NC with the following conditions. Number one, to the 8 conditions, use restrictions identified in the February 13th, 2024 letter from Ryzik and Ryzik, including the item number 8 of the recording of a conservation easement. Number 2, that at the time of site plan submission, that the site plan come before the entire planning commission rather than just the review committee. And that also at the time of site plan, that a full traffic impact study with the submission come to the planning commission as well. Those 3 conditions.
Is there support for that motion?
I'll support the motion.
So we have a motion by Mr. Andre, support by Mr. Johnson. Any further discussion? Is everyone good with the conditions that Mr. Andre has put out there, that the site plan is reviewed at Planning Commission? I'm wondering whether you have any input on that, or?
We were just discussing the conditions of the motion, and including the one that said site plan review by the planning commission.
Yes.
And we were discussing whether that was a reasonable, not reasonable, but a binding condition.
I think it's a recommendation we'd like the Township Board to consider, and if they so do so, they can make it as part of the condition at the Township Board level.
I do believe that and I can look it up, but I believe the standards in the zoning ordinance for the site plan review committee does give the site plan review committee the ability to refer something to the planning commission, so you may do that.
Okay.
Any other discussion regarding the motion?
Wish we could add more, but we can't.
All right, we're going to do a roll call vote on this one. We'll start down on my left, unless you don't want, if you want to defer. Or,
I vote no.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Yes.
Since I'm the chair, I get to go last.
Okay, I'll vote yes.
Mr.
Yeah, seeing how we have room to wiggle and sending a message, I'll vote no.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
So far, we have 5 yes, 2 no. Mr. Gellings also votes no. But the motion is successful to send up to the Township Board for recommendation for approval of the rezone. So you're all free to go. We'll take 5 minutes here to, so if we go through our agenda here, we're at item 7B. Is that where we're at?
Yes.
We are. This is,
May I make one comment real quick? I apologize to anybody who, when the comment was said, anybody who voted yes for this should be done. Please put me in that same camp, because the only reason why I did the no was to, hey, Township Board, you need to think about this. Voting yes for this was the legal obligation. Like, I think every one of us wants to do what's best for the community. So I did not do that to be away from that decision. I knew that Paul's already called me out on it. So that's not the reason why I did it. So if everybody who gets yes needs to leave, then pile me in that too, because I do too. So I appreciate us doing things the legal way to do it, so.
We did.
Okay.
Okay.
Make this quick and easy. You may recall that for the last month or maybe 2 months, I think, right, Andy? We've been talking about parking minimums, particularly with respect to industrial uses and warehousing, where we've observed over the years that we just seem to be requiring gobs and gobs of parking for uses that don't seem to really need that much. You have the authority in the zoning ordinance now to work with an applicant to defer parking if they find an area on their site that does require them to do that engineering work and plan it out and make sure that what they are proposing as deferred parking can in fact be built according to the standards of the ordinance and is sufficient. That is something that you have now, and you've done that a couple of times where you've deferred parking fields for a later date. Planning Commission was interested in discussing some standards that might just bring those requirements down a little bit. So based on some conversations last month and some research, you'll see the proposed language in red, which really cuts down the parking by about half. The requirement for light industrial from 2 spaces per 1,000 to 1 space per 1,000, or 1 space per employee at peak shift. We said whichever is lower to really get that. I think that was something that Planning Commission talked about last time. But then adding in that buffer plus 20%. We picked the 20% because it's consistent with the number of that we tie to parking maximums, which is 120% of the required parking. So that just seemed like a number that was consistent in the ordinance. And then increasing or decreasing the parking required for warehousing from 1 space to each 1,500 to 1 space per each 1,700, plus 1 space per each employee, and again, whichever is lower instead of whichever is higher, plus 20%.
So if we didn't make any changes to the ordinance, we could look at every plan as it came in front of us and work with the applicant so that they have sufficient space to construct more parking if they need it in the future.
Right, in terms of deferred parking, yes.
And we could look at the ordinance again in a year or 2 and see how we've handled each case as they came before us.
Could.
That would be my suggestion.
Not change the ordinance at all,
Change
but
the
just leave
ordinance,
the
just
provisions in there.
Use that language that you talked about.
I'm good with that. I have a quick question. When you talked about the 20 plus, lower plus 20%, I like that. Now, does that still give latitude to then add the 120% parking onto it, or is it capped at that number? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, yes. So if, say, for example, that someone would have needed 30 spaces pre this language.
Yes.
Now they only need 10, but we still wouldn't let them build more than 12 spaces.
Exactly.
Right.
So it is capped, and there wouldn't be any provision to add another 20% onto that 120% that's in there. Is that correct?
Without approval of the Planning Commission.
Okay.
You do have the ability.
So it still would stay in place?
Yeah. And
Okay,
I think
that's,
maybe I can recall one. I think it was a senior housing, assisted living situation where they literally were parking on the grass. They're like, we need more parking, and I think you guys granted them that.
Thank you.
Additional.
I guess, Jeremy, I'd like to get your input. Let's
So
start there.
so Jill and I have discussed this at length. The last 3 or 4 warehousing / light industrial complexes that you as a board have approved have had deferred parking. We're trying to get away from that so we don't have to make those decisions. The employee or the client is required to give me number of employees at peak shift, plus they can add 20% on top of that. Who better to tell me what kind of parking they need than the applicant? So that's why we went this route. I'm not saying that this is the end all be all, but consistent, as Jill said, I'm just reiterating that 20% is consistent with the 20% that as it stands today, that you folks today have the ability to grant.
And I guess counter to that, I've recently gone out to a property, it was industrial, that people were parking all over the place. It's because of their shift overlap. So if they're being honest, they know the best as how many.
Right, so if they need 100 and then they're afforded 120, 20 spaces should give them that overlap between shifts, is the thought. They know how many employees they have at peak shift. They know when the time changes. They know when the shift changes. If they need more than that 20%, they would have to get a variance.
Mr. Hoffman?
Thank you. Could there be something in there that, because some people might want to limit what's there, and then they get in trouble, and so they're parking everywhere they want to be, blocking aisles, things of that nature. Could that be a trigger that if the township's notified, saying, hey, you said you needed this much, but you got people parking everywhere, now we come back and say, no, you got to add on?
So, yes, and that would be part of kind of start with code enforcement, which I'm in charge of. That would come to me and I would say, hey, look, you need X amount of more parking spaces, I believe, because you're parking all over the grass. I have the ability to grant a 10% addition administratively. There's very few things that I can do that for, but administratively, it does not have to come back to the board. But if it gets egregious and let's just say they said they only needed 50, I say that I can only approve another 10, and they need 90, let's just say, that would have to come back before you folks.
At that
To amend the
point,
site plan.
what would be, how do you hold them to actually making more parking at that time? Because before they're open up, you have the C of O, they gotta do what you say to do. Once they're in there, how would you stop them from
These are
parking?
the things that we've been talking about too, as people across the country are talking about reducing parking minimums. We have to recognize that in a lot of the places that we have to have cars to get around. And so how do we make sure, we're not in a downtown environment where we can just park on the street. You can't park on Door Highway. You can't park in a lot of these places. So how do we make sure we have those provisions? So we've been thinking about those things too. You do have language in the deferred parking section that talks about if it's observed that there's a need for additional parking, then the township issues a letter. I think maybe something like that. And maybe we include language about making sure, I was kind of right, this is not ordinance language, but something like each use is responsible for ensuring the sufficient parking for users on the site. And then we can use some of that additional language that we have in the deferred parking section that would require.
Can we refer to section for deferred parking? Can we just?
We might,
add
yeah,
that in
either that or.
But I mean, this is just a industrial issue.
Right.
This isn't, we're not having issues in the commercial sector. We're not having issues in residential. It's just these warehousing and light industrial where the parking calculation just gets extrapolated tenfold. It's crazy how fast it explodes.
I love how we're pulling back from impervious surface, wasting money. I have no problem with any of that. I'm just saying, there's gonna be somebody that's gonna take advantage of that.
I see, yeah.
And say this, and then they'll park on, because they don't have to pay for it and all that. The second thing, you mentioned how this is only for industrial, but to go to the commercial sites and things of that nature, the thing that I've seen is aisleways too small, parking spaces too small, and things of that nature. Do you ever see that with industrial? Or would you see them trying to squeeze down? I mean, is there anything for that?
So we've, in the last, what was it, 1.5 years or 2 years since we've been starting these amendments, we've increased parking size across the board. That's not just in one area. They're 10 by 20 now. And now with that, the drive lane has to be 26 feet wide on two-way traffic.
Perfect.
Instead of 24. So
Thank you very much.
That's across the board.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments, I guess, from planning commission members? Those that are still awake?
It's my contacts. So dry right now.
So the next step is you're gonna.
Recommend to have a public hearing on this at the next available meeting. And the next available meeting is the 4th, but I'm asking as part of the next agenda item, and we move it from the 4th to the 11th, the following week. Unfortunately, I cannot attend the 4th meeting, so I'm requesting that we move it back a week.
I don't have a problem with that personally. I don't know if anybody else.
No objection.
All right, so
Do
that's.
we,
next-
do you want to, everybody's consensus, yes, move it to plan, or public hearing? Yes, 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 yes. Dolores?
Public hearing.
Public hearing next month? Okay. All right.
Yep, that's
All right.
fine.
Yep, so the 11th is what, well, I'll have you guys make a motion as the next agenda item to officially move it from the 4th to the 11th.
Okay.
Can I make that motion?
Sure.
I make that motion to move. Yeah, thanks.
Motion by Mr. Hoffman to move next month's meeting back a week,
From April 4th to the 11th.
supported by Mr. Bush. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 8-0.
I think we're all set. I think we can go home if the motion's in order.
Motion to adjourn the meeting at, what time is it right now?
I want to
9:06
have a
PM?
committee report.
Oh, well, we did have a site plan review, so I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
don't mean to step on your toes. I'm sorry, sir.
In fact, we had a site plan
was there,
review
man.
review this morning, not this morning, earlier this afternoon. It was to we did a residential open space that we approved back in 2004 that is still in the process of being built out, believe it or not. It's south of Hill Road, west of Center Road.
Cambridge Park.
Down the street from me.
It's south of the church there.
Oh, okay, yep, I know where you're at.
It abuts the Thread Creek, right?
Loris was on the board too.
What's the city?
What's the city?
Yep.
The old WTC, is that the property?
So they put in
Yeah, Paul.
originally it had two phases, an A and a B, and this was a phase C. I don't know, what is it, maybe 20 homes?
30.
Yep.
30 additional added to it, which will help with the streets, because right now the streets just kind of go and stop. End up-
Finishing the loop.
Yeah, finishing a loop of the couple streets that are there. So we granted it preliminary site plan approval with very few conditions and left the final review up to Jeremy. Trusted. He can take care of the minor things that are left. And there are a couple of homes in there under construction, phase B right now.
Yes.
They're still working on it, but it's different builders that are buying portions of the second phase and this third phase. So the developer is building out the roads for them, and then they're buying the lots. So that's all I've got from site plan. Anybody else have any other reports?
Next week, or next month, will we be going over the landscape ordinance?
Yes. Yes. So that'll be a discussion, and then we'll do a public hearing for the parking that we just talked about tonight. I think that's it for discussion. We don't have anything really. It's on the books. We've got more on the grid, but we're not, you know, nothing we've discussed at length.
All right, I think there was a motion that was
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting at 9:09 PM.
There's a motion by Mr. Anderson.
I'll second.
Support by Mr. Andre. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, we are adjourned, 8-0 with the vote.